What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads that is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And being part of that team in 2022 and 2021, myself and members of the team, we reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers and dads around the world. And as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem, and Blackalicious too. You know what I'm saying? So I'd like to welcome everyone who's watching this live or on the replay. If you're watching it live, wherever you're watching it live, please feel free to make comments. You can make comments and our new friends will respond to them in real time because they are outstanding. So before I bring them up on the platform, we're going to be talking a little about the organization they represent. So let's get it. So Building a Black Archive is a community archive that unearths and documents contemporary Black Canadian histories and experiences, as well as histories and experiences within the African Diaspora. BABA. Oh, that's a BABA. That's a good entendre. Works includes workshops, speaking engagements, community archival work, consultations, and an annual artist residency program for Black artists. It was started in 2019 by Alannah Johnson and Jonsaba Jabbi, who were connected through a mutual friend and shared many similarities, unbeknownst to them. BABA exists in an interesting space in the sense that they are not an institutional archive, but they also don't exist within the traditional community archives frame. We're going to find out about that. And the best way to describe the type of archiving they do is through the practice of alternative archive using oral histories, memory work, and new media technologies as a way to make themselves accessible to members of the Black community. Since 2019, they have hosted 3 artist residencies, which over 15 artists have attended. They have given over 20 workshops and talks on community archives and Black Canadian cultural production through Canadian hip hop to academic institutions, galleries, and others. Themes of the residences have included hip hop and the Black experience. I know we're going to get to talk about hip hop because it's the 50th anniversary this year. Black experience in Ontario, 1980 to 2010, mapping Black geographies in Canada, and archiving everyday Black life. Wow, we could spend about 2 days on each one of those. But you know what? We are blessed and highly favored to have Jonsaba Jabbi and Alannah Johnson, the founders of BABA, in the house. So you know what? I think it's time to bring them to this digital stage. So here we go. There is Alannah, and here we go. Jonsaba, what is going on?
Pretty good. Thanks for that introduction. I feel special. What about you, Alannah?
We're doing really great.
Yeah.
Well, you are special. Don't you know that?
You know what? I think you really restored that within us. So thank you for the affirmations and the reminders. But we're really happy to be here in digital space with you. So thank you for having us.
Well, the pleasure is mine. I'm looking forward to an interesting, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering conversation with both you all. So before we go any further about Baba, because to Baba, that Baba. Let's find out a little bit about each one of you. Who wants to start first? Share a little bit about themselves to the Dr. Vibe Show family.
Sure. I'll start first. I saw the look, Alannah. I saw the look. I thought I could do that. Okay, I'll start first. So my name is Jonsaba Jabbi. I'm born and raised in Toronto. I'm a writer, cultural historian, and I've also worked in the nonprofit world as a communications coordinator. And these days, just co-running BABA alongside Alannah. I was born and raised in the west end of Toronto, so like Bloor, Dovercourt, Dufferin, St. Clair area. That's where I typically grew up in. And how I got into really learning more about African Canadian history was in grade 7 history class, Canadian history class in particular. I stumbled upon the word Africville, which was pretty much only a paragraph in like a 300-page Canadian history textbook. And the thought that came to mind was, oh, I didn't know there was somewhere in Canada called Africville. So that was kind of my first kind of iteration into learning more about African Canadian history. So since age 12, I've been kind of teaching myself about our history and learning more each and every day. I also think it's important that, you know, we should know our own personal histories as well and where we came from and things like that. So my background is Grenadian and Gambian. So I grew up knowing a little bit about both my heritages there. So yeah, so that's just a little bit about me. So I'm going to throw it back to you, Alannah.
Jonsaba. So my name is Alannah Johnson, and I am one of the co-founders of Building a Black Archive. I'm also a writer, former publisher, and also bodies liberationist. So, you know, a lot of my work is centered in Black histories, but also Black futurism. And I also work in equity, diversity, and inclusion and anti-racism policy and programming. So that's a bit about my training. However, I grew up in Toronto in a beloved community that is now called Little Jamaica. So, yeah,
I grew up. I spent when I had hair and younger. I grew up on a street called Belgravia, which is you go north on Marley Avenue, and it's about 2 or 3 streets north of Eglinton off of Marley Avenue. So that was my stomping ground when I was very, very young.
Amazing. My father actually had a store on Eglinton. So, and I grew up closer to Vaughan, however, just, you know, along Oakwood. And so Little Jamaica was very much my like childhood and a very integral part of my formative years. So a bit about my entry into this work would be I went away to school, university, and when I returned 5 years later, I noticed that, you know, the community was ever changing very rapidly, and a lot of it was not being documented. And so that was, you know, a call to action for me, because, you know, the community was such a fundamental part of my childhood and a lot of my friends as well. And so, yeah, that's how, you know, a bit about how I arrived at archiving. However, I also love Black geographies. I feel like, you know, as Jonsaba had a story about Africville, I have one similar about just literally like studying maps. And my grade 8 teacher used to have flags hanging from the ceiling. And I was a bit annoying. I would always ask, which country is this? Which country is that? And I'd go home and I'd research more about Black geographies. And so as much as, you know, I have a will and, you know, excitement about Black Canadian history and geographies, I also love learning more about the African diaspora.
Wow. We could just spend the next hour just on both your history. So let me ask, before we go any further, I want to say a shout out to Frequency Event Promotions. Says greetings and salutations. Thank you, Frequency Event Promotions. Just before we went live, I jumped on your Instagram live for a few moments, and he said, "Oh, when are you doing another show?" I said, "In about 20 minutes." So Frequency Event Promotions shouts out. And again, if you are watching this live, especially, please put your comments, questions into the comments section or platform, wherever you're watching. And we'd love to put you up there. And do tell us where you're chiming in from. Tell us where you're watching our conversation live from. I want to ask for both of you, you sound like what was your experience in knowing about Black Canadian history before you started on this journey?
Jonsaba, do you want to go, or we do this often?
This time, you can go this time. I started it off. You
okay. All right. And if there's more dead air, I'm just gonna say I'm gonna pick one of you. All right. So if you don't jump in, I'm gonna tell it go.
Perfect.
All right.
So again, I spent a lot of time, you know, in Little Jamaica. And when I was growing up in the 90s, there was a lot of programming, particularly ran by Black women at an organization called Art Starts. A lot of folks don't know that ArtStarts actually had an office in the event space at Eglinton and just before Dufferin, and then later on Oakwood, just closer towards St. Clair. But they were always in the community, and a lot of Black women were doing programming. And so they would hold a lot of space for the community, and we do a lot of, music, like drumming, but also a lot of storytelling. And so I grew up particularly with having elders doing a lot of storytelling and talking about their experiences, particularly their migration stories, from elsewhere to here, and also a lot of like folklore. So it was always exciting for me. But I would say that when I attended Oakwood Collegiate, they had a particular program that would take Black students, or had a particular interest in sharing Black Canadian history with Black students. And so they'd actually take us to like Windsor and explore a lot of that area, a lot of Black Canadian history in that area. So I would say that, in high school, I definitely could identify that I had a particular interest in learning more about Black histories. However, I think it was also fostered in me from a young age. So I was really fortunate to be a part of that community.
I want to jump in for both you this conversation piece. How much was Black history talked about in your own families when you're growing up, whether it was Black Canadian history, Black history, or even your own family history?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like for me, like my parents always would tell us stories about like our history, my dad in particular, because he is from the Gambia. He would always tell us folklores, but also tell us about like his ancestors and where they came from. And my mom would do the same thing. So my first entry point to like Black history was essentially my own at first. And then, but when you're growing up in a country like Canada, which back in the day and still up to this day is super white, like the general culture is super white still, you're trying to find your place. You're trying to figure out like what is your identity. You don't relate to your parents' identity too much, even though that's what you grew up with.
Yeah, I
but
agree.
You also don't fit into the larger Canadian society. So where do you really fit in? And for me, I kind of had an interesting positioning because I was both Caribbean and I was both African. And back in those days, there were tensions between those communities, for various reasons. So you kind of are always wondering, where do you fit in? So for me, a lot of how I started to cultivate my own like self-teaching or self-teaching myself on Black history was through reading books, taking in music. And oftentimes, because here in Canada, we do get a lot of like Black content that's mainly African American focused, a lot of like shows that we would watch, music that we would listen to, a lot of it was largely African American, with the exception of, Much Music and Rap City. And then later on with Flow 93.5 coming to play, we get to hear more about like more Canadian hip hop. So a lot of my entryway into histories has been self-taught and it's been community based. I also grew up Seventh-day Adventist. So at my local church, they used to do Black History Month programming for the full month. So that's how I would even learn even more about Black history. So a lot of it didn't happen in the classroom for me. It was actually in community by like people like myself who have a passion for, passing down knowledge and narratives and stories to the next generation. So,
Alannah, how about yourself? How much was Black Canadian, African history part of your family when you were getting older? That's in your young days, in your youth.
I'll be honest in saying that a lot of these conversations did not happen in the home for me.
Okay.
I think that my mother was very intentional about buying books, and we'd be at different events where I would be able to access a lot of particularly programming, or just a lot of conversations and sharing happened in those spaces. So I was really grateful for that. But in the home, it actually didn't happen for me. My mother is from Grenada and my father is from Jamaica. And I didn't grow up with a lot of family. A lot of my family are either back home or in the States. And so I particularly was one of those kids that would, go out into the world very curious about my histories. And I think it was only when I actually was 21, I started asking my mom more about the family. It was always kind of a contentious thing to ask. So families are complicated. Black families are really complicated. And I grew up, knowing that truthfully, that it's very complex.
Okay, fantastic. You're both doing a great job. Relax. We're just having a conversation. You're just doing fine. So give you a quick little break just for everyone who's watching live on the replay. Subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button so you get notified of the conversations I host. And also like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And also, if you're interested on advertising your product or service on the platform, please feel free to email me at dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. So let's get back to the stars of the show. I want to know, how did you two meet?
Well,
inquiring minds want to know. Baba-ites.
Yes. I'll start it off, and I guess Jonsaba, you could finish it off. But we actually, interestingly enough, we met 4 years ago, and a mutual friend was kind of like, hey, you both are doing like really cool things. Actually, they said it to Jonsaba. I had no idea this conversation actually happened. And so I received a message from Jonsaba kind of just introducing herself and wanting to know more about like what I was doing. And so, we agreed to meet, and the rest is, as they say, is history. We sat in a coffee shop for hours, just talking a lot about.
Where was the coffee shop?
I don't remember.
Oh, come on, you don't remember? You don't remember?
No, it was Pilot Coffee Roasters. It was in the Queen and Shaw, Ossington area. Yeah.
Jonsaba, you were on your lunch break, right?
I was on my lunch break. I was working.
You're kidding me.
I was literally working through the nonprofit industrial complex at that time, and literally used to take my lunch breaks and do whatever, whether shop or like take meetings with people because I was trying to find a way out. So so I
reclaiming her time as
exactly. So my lunch break went a little too long that day, but for good reasons. It brought us
that sort of accelerated you leaving the organization, maybe.
Yes,
exactly.
Oh, so fantastic. So on the YouTube, Fa Joe says, awesome work, girls.
Thank you.
And Frequency Event Promotions is tuning in from Toronto, Canada, aka the 6. So when you met, what did you talk about? Do you remember that first conversation?
I do. I remember us talking a little bit like our childhoods, like where we grew up. And that's when we began to realize that like we grew up in such close proximity to one another. Me being, that little Jamaica area, and Jonsaba being St. Clair and Dufferin. So I went to Quick Collegiate, which is very close to that intersection. And so I feel like there was only a few degrees of separation between our lives. And so it was actually really cool. And then another unifier was the fact that we both have Grenadian mothers. And so we always say that's a very unique experience.
Yes.
So I feel like that was also like a huge part of our conversation.
Okay. Okay, so what do you remember, if anything, Jonsaba? It seems like Alannah knows the whole story. What do you remember of that first conversation?
Yeah, I pretty much remember everything that she mentioned. It's very rare, or not rare, but it's not every day you meet other Grenadians just really in Toronto, unless you're going to like very intentional places where Grenadians are. So I was like, oh, wow, like it was that's the one vivid memory. I'm like finding it out that we're both half Grenadian and it was our mothers. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. Because Alannah's experience with like in her community, a lot of her friends who are half Grenadian are usually the fathers are Grenadians. And for me, it was more like the mothers are like the people in my community, everyone in Grenada, Toronto, or in the Grenadian Toronto community, especially the, the second and third generations are half Grenadian. Like no one's really full Grenadian. Everyone's half Grenadian, half Jamaican, half Grenadian and Lucian, Vinci, African, all of that stuff. So, at least one parent is always Grenadian, but like we had very diverse experiences of what that looked like. So we were talking a lot about like growing up with Grenadian mothers and how they act, which is very different from people growing up with Grenadian fathers. Very different experience.
I would have loved to be an ear to the wall in that first conversation, because I'm sure there were a lot of jokes.
Yes, there were. And then we bonded over, working in nonprofit and, doing especially community work. We both worked in the community art sector in Toronto, which is a very, under-resourced sector in terms of the nonprofit industry. And, talking about our experiences, we worked at organizations that had collaborated with each other variously. So we had very similar stories. And as well, we talked a lot about the gentrification that was going on in Toronto and figuring out like we're only in our 30s. So we're not that old, but we realize a lot of Toronto that we grew up with no longer exists. A lot of the publications we grew up on don't exist anymore. The spaces we used to go to don't exist anymore. And it just seems like Blackness is being totally erased from the city. So we talked a lot about how we can kind of reclaim and kind of unearth those memories that we have of the times that did exist, of the places that did exist, and how can we use that to pass that knowledge over to young people who are not growing up getting this knowledge as well, and how we can use like the internet, the new media technologies that exist to make it more accessible for young people and other members of our communities as well.
Okay. So before we go to break, how did that meeting become Baba? Because Baba, if I understand correctly, Baba didn't exist when you had your first conversation.
No.
So how did Baba begin?
Yeah, good question. So I think I would say that conversation then became like ... to be continued.
Okay.
And so our first call to action actually was applying to grants. I think a lot of the way that grants are structured, it afforded us the time and space to actually sit down and think through and write what we seek to build. And I think it came from a space where it's like, we rely a lot on our own memory and, events that have happened in our life, particularly surrounding our love for like Canadian hip hop and that golden age era of hip hop in the late 90s and early 2000s, and how, as we got older, a lot of that was not being preserved, and a lot of memory, a lot of cultural memory was being erased, and we didn't know where that central place was to go access, those particular things that we love to engage with. So yeah, we definitely started with, let's just apply for funding. And I'm really glad that we actually had that spark of like action, because, before we knew it, lockdown would happen, it would be a global pandemic. And it feels like we were able to meet in real time and space and connect and bond and kind of envision what this looks like. Even though in practice now it's taking on many, new forms, I think that particular conversation was a really special meeting space for us. And we went to, let's apply to funding. And thankfully we did work for nonprofits, so we were very familiar about the language.
You had some game. Some game. Good for you.
Yeah. So, that's kind of where it came about. Yeah.
Jonsaba, anything you want to add to what your partner in crime just eloquently laid out?
I'll only add that I think once that initial meeting happened, we started meeting like somewhat weekly, after work, literally put in like 4 or 5 hours of just like brainstorming, grant writing and things like that. So we were working on, like, we really were like, let's combine the ideas that we have that we've been sitting with individually without knowing each other for years, and like let's bring them together and see if we can get money to like run them. So we put in a lot of work it's crazy to think it's going to be 4 years in September since we met and since the project technically started, because it's been like blood, sweat, and tears, literally, a lot of that. So I just wanted to add upon like what Alannah was saying, because since we met, we've literally been grinding and working towards this.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a pause from the conversation grind for a few moments and take a little bit of a break. So we're speaking with Jonsaba, Jabbi, and Alannah Johnson of Building a Black Archive, which is based here in Toronto. We're going to take about a 90-second break so they can relax, because I still feel they're a little tense. And we're just going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to get a quick little, I guess, a nice message from a supporter. So hold tight. We'll be back in about 90 seconds.
And that's what I feel like. You feel like you're the Harriet Tubman of the mind.
I am.
I feel like I'm I'm one of the Harriet Tubmans of intelligent Black people. Like, I want to liberate y'all from like being left behind and ignored and oblivion. Now, really, the rappers get all the attention. Seriously, does anybody else feel this way? Like ignorant Black people, they'll be all up, getting all the headlines on the Shade Room.
Overly sexualized Black folks.
Over like the twerkers and the just people that don't always represent the best of us, the diversity, like people like Dr. Vibe. Like, everybody should know about people like Dr. Vibe. Dr. Vibe he's trying to do good work for Black people.
Dr. Vibe from Toronto, good to see you, my brother. Dr. Vibe, everybody follow Dr. Vibe. He has a great show. He's very good at what he does, and I have a lot of respect for him.
Okay, so let me hop into this. What's up, Dr. Vibe? How you doing? Everybody, if you see Dr. Vibe in the chat, everybody go follow the Dr. Vibe show. Dr. Vibe is a real smart brother and a good human being. I like the guy a lot, and he's very intelligent. And I think everyone should pay attention to what he's got going on. We got to shine the spotlight on the intelligent Black people out here that are really doing the good work. Don't just pay attention to the rappers and the celebrities. A lot of these people are losers. Your true winners are your people in your community that are really having your back. Helping us to have stronger families and a stronger community. So Dr. Vibe is in that category. So you might see the Dr. Vibe show in this chat. If you see him, please go follow him. Okay. All right. So anyway.
Shout out to Dr. Boyce and Dr. Alicia Watkins for their continuous support. And definitely you can follow Dr. Boyce Watkins at boycewatkins.com, and Dr. Alicia Watkins, you can follow her at Coaching with Dr. Alicia. Two great supporters of the Dr. Vibe show. And as we were saying before, we're speaking with two powerhouses, Jonsaba, Jabbi, and Alannah Johnson of Building a Black Archive. And we're going to go on Instagram for a few moments here. So let's say hello to our Instagram family. You're catching some of this conversation live with Jonsaba and Alannah of Building a Black Archive. And I want to know my next conversation piece. Oh, actually, we got a question. Okay, there is a question. We're going to hold off to a bit. I see your question, Fajo. We're going to get to it in just a moment. And look at this. Building a Black Archive is also on Instagram. Follow me. So you got me. You're cornering me. All right, no problem. It's all good. How long did it take from the time you both met to getting the name Building a Black Archive? How did that name come about?
So we had another name before Building a Black Archive, which I will not name because it's a common name to find out. And so we were using that name for a couple months, even, and things like that. And then we found out that there were a couple things named after that. So we were just like, no, we have to find a new name that we can go with, but also sounds really true to us. So it took us a couple weeks, I would say, to like figure out what our new name would be. I don't remember exactly the process, but I remember there was a conversation we were having, and I know we were talking a lot about like the purpose of archives, and I was mentioning that, the word Baba in a lot of West African languages means father. So I believe it was Alannah, correct me if I'm wrong, that was Alannah who came up with Building a Black Archive, and then we ended up just using BABA as like the acronym that would describe it. And that made more sense to us because, in West African culture, elders are really important, and also griots are like central pieces of knowledge keepers and passing down histories from one generation to another. So we felt like building a Black archive and Baba for short really encapsulated that idea around like eldership and passing down knowledge and history and narratives and stories and histories and all of that. So that's what I vaguely remember. It feels like such a blur now about the naming process because I think we were just in the moment of just trying to find a name. But yeah, Alannah, I don't know if you remember anything from that time when we got to that name.
It was very stressful. I remember that because we did have a timeline to like choose a new name. But I remember also a part of the conversation, because building a Black archive is so literal, the intention was also for it to be continuous, for it to evolve. And our intention is always to, we want more archives out here. So, if our organization serves as a blueprint for others to come along, then, that is a form of success for us. We don't want to be the only Black archive out here. We want others to, take up this work. So that's what I remember as well.
I love the name because the name tells exactly what you do. It's right to the point. I absolutely love it. So on Instagram, I want to shout out Dr. Tachi. Dr. Tachi is the host of the livest conversation about media tech and pop culture called Mediascope. It's on not Fridays. I should know by now. I say it enough every time she jumps in. It's on Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Instagram Live, and then 6 p.m. on Eastern time, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, and other platforms. And also in the process of launching her network, the Indie Soup Network, that has, I'd say, over 27, 28 content creators. And I'm blessed to be one of them. I think I'm the only Black Canadian content creator on the platform so far. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Tachi. I also want to shout out Mr. Gospel Cafe. Also want to shout out Ron Lewis Photos, who's another member of the Indie Soup family. And also, I want to make sure they're covered here. Vestia.os. Dr. Mo, that's you? No problem. Thanks for jumping in. So I love the name. And also, I love this. Comments are coming in. Cher Knight, who's another great supporter, who is the better half of Ryan Knight, who's my co-host of the Morning Vibe, Monday and Friday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern time on this platform. She says, greetings all ladies. What you are doing is phenomenal. Respect for the hard work and the hustling. We'll get to that. Well, you know what? You've encountered. Okay, you know what? There's so many different ways. Okay, let's talk about some of the successes that you've had along the way. Actually, let's put it this way. What was the first big win for Baba in each of your minds?
That's a good question. Big win. Well, I guess, Lana, maybe securing funding would have been a major win, even though, the idea that we conceptualized was pre-pandemic. We did get funding during the early days of the pandemic. So I think that would be one win, that our first win, I would say, for us only knowing each other maybe 5 or 6 months at that point to now the project becoming would have the opportunity to become something. We would essentially build an archive out of it. So that would have been like what I would imagine our first win. And I'm thinking about our second one. So Alannah, I don't know. I'm thinking about what are the other ones. That question threw me off because I'm like, what have we not gone through? What have we not gone through? But yes, wins. Alannah, over to you.
I would say launching it and also actually like running programming. Like it was huge. It was major. It felt really great. We were really excited. This was like, again, the early stages of the project. So like, we were working on like syllabus and like, just pooling a lot of like resources into what we want to share with the youth. And so I think launching it and doing the youth residency was like another huge win. But as Jonsaba said, we have a lot to discuss when it comes to a lot of barriers or roadblocks and what we've overcome. But we're still here. So
yeah. You know what? Let me give you a little secret. You know, one of the secrets of success: don't quit.
there you go.
Sorry, it was too complicated, but don't quit.
Yeah.
Simple
You're
as
right.
that. I want to shout out on Instagram, Coach Oliver Levy. If you want to know about parenting, he's your go-to source when it comes to one of the go-to sources of parenting online, Coach Oliver Levy. I know you were doing it. I think you have an upcoming event, Oliver, involving basketball. I think I saw something online. So if it hasn't happened, I know you're going to rock the house. If it has happened, I know you rock the house. Also want to say again, Frequency Event Promotions has now come back to IG. I don't know if you're also on YouTube. Hey, no problem. And also Dr. Tachi, who was on IG. I don't know if you're still on IG. I can tell if you're still on IG. You are. So she's watching on IG and on YouTube. There you go. So popular, she's watching on both. There you go. So let me ask, what was the first event that you put on? Was it the residency?
I believe we did a speaker series before then.
Okay.
So that was a part of our community aspect, is that, during the beginning stages of the, in 2020, when we were in lockdown, we started the speaker series, and it was a space for us to kind of introduce and like massage the idea of like the archive and what exactly we were working towards, and how folks can come along. So we did do a speaker series, and I believe it was Journalism 101. And it was because we had to pivot to written form with our youth in that first year. We decided that we wanted to have a discussion about like, what does journalism and what does like writing about Black history entail? And that was actually a really good turnout. That audience was pretty big, one of our biggest ones. So that, again, I guess that was also a win. But I think that was our first event.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. All right. I also want to find out, well, you know what? There's a lot of questions, so I want the audience to drive the ship. So Fajo, I've been holding off for a bit, and you'd like to know, they would like to know some more about some of your projects that you have accomplished so far. So I know you were excited to talk about it. Okay, I've opened the gates. I'm going to sit back, and we're going to sit back and listen. Go for it.
Sure. So yeah, like Alannah mentioned, we did do the speaker series, which I personally love our speaker series because we get to interview people that we grew up with or like admired their work from afar. So one of the ones that I personally loved was interviewing Phil Vassell of Word Magazine.
I know Phil.
Because we grew up on Word Magazine. I always used to get copies from like Lucky's Barbershop on St. Clair. So I grew up reading and wanting to write for Word. So to have the opportunity for us to interview him, that was like pretty amazing. And in addition to that, we ran about 3 artist residencies. We each had a theme for each year. So our first year was hip hop and the Black experience in Canada. And that focused on like Blackness and Canadian, through the wires of Canadian hip hop from the 1980s to 2010. That's where we
Maestro.
cut it off. Yeah, Maestro, Mishi
Farley Flex.
Yeah, yes. Solitaire, Mishi Me, Ghetto Concept.
Our favorite. Ghetto Concept.
Okay, you know what? It's interesting. I bet you there's someone that you haven't even thought about that you should interview in that series.
Okay, well,
let me see if I can test you and see who I'm talking about. This gentleman was the first Black VJ on Much Music.
Oh, come on. Okay. Michael Williams?
Yes.
Michael Williams, yes. He's on our list. He's actually on our list. Like
I interviewed him many years ago. I actually have a decent relationship with him. Actually, you should interview Mike Williams.
Yes. He's on our
think
list.
That is almost a must in regards to Canadian hip hop, or just we have to hail up Mr. Williams. He was the first melanated face on a national music network and he not only brought a lot of hip hop, a lot of jazz, a lot of funk, and he was himself. He was unapologetically Black, long before it was unapologetically Black in Canadian media. So definitely, just going back, and I had this speaker series. How come you didn't approach me? I'm not saying. I'm just saying. Okay, you know, I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that. Also, Coach Oliver Levy, who finished off he just finished off a series for sports parents, how to get your student athletes to play more with confidence. He was asking, how can he be part of the speaker series, or is it already done?
No, we're building this, right? Like
it's building a Black archive. It's building a Black archive. We're building it. It is continuous. It is evolving. It is forever, you know?
No point of arrival.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I just wondered if you shut the door and just left us behind.
Absolutely not. You'll hear from us. Everyone will hear from us at some point.
Okay.
What time? But you'll hear from us.
Okay. Don't leave me behind. You know.
Never
that. I did have you on something. Just okay. All right. Just want to remind that. So, what are any other successes along the way that you want to share with our family?
Let me see. You know, our artist residency. You know,
Can I just interrupt? What is an artist residency? Give us some education. What is that?
Sure. Alannah, you look like you're going to say something. So
go ahead. Yeah.
So artist residency typically is for artists who are practicing and want to develop their artistry more. They would take themselves Typically artist residencies, most of them either go out of the country or go out of their surroundings and spend some time doing dedicated work that will help them grow as an artist. And some of that work, eventually they will use that to present publicly to an audience, or it just helps them deepen their artistic practice. So what we wanted to do, because we wanted to work primarily with Black youth in Ontario, we wanted to bring an aspect of artist residency, because artist residencies are typically very exclusive. A lot of them actually cost a lot of money for regular artists to even attend. And we wanted to make it accessible. So some of the things we did, we included a stipend for artists who were accepted into the residency. We included resources, even providing grocery cards, because we were in the thick of the pandemic at that time. So folks were going to be inside doing all of that. So we decided to make it an accessible residency where there would be more incentives to support artists that were going to be part of our residencies, which typically would last a few weeks. But that was the way we wanted to approach it, to make it a little bit more humane and a little bit more accessible. And none of the artists who were involved in it had to pay a fee to do it. It was completely free for them to participate. And the end goal for them was they created their own podcast episode or written piece of work that would be part of our archive. So that's how we approached artist residencies. But oftentimes, a lot of traditional residencies are usually a lot of money. They're usually somewhere outside of your own environment. And they're just not always accessible to people, everyday people.
Okay, good stuff. Anything you want to add, Alannah?
No, Jonsaba said it perfectly.
Okay, no problem. So frequency event promotions, yes, I left out somebody. We left out Tony Young, Master T.
Yeah.
We did do a workshop for our youth in residence this year. It was a really great workshop. The youth really loved engaging with his particular reel as a VJ at Much Music. You know, he brought in a lot of media resources, so we were able to see some of the interviews that he led, particularly with Tupac and Lauryn Hill, and then he, bestowed some gems upon the youth about, how to conduct a really great and effective interview. And thankfully, the youth were able to apply those skills and interview some really great local Canadian legends, such as Charmaine Gooden, who runs the Black Fashion Archive here, Ponytails, who was a dancer in a lot of Sean Paul music videos and was a huge part of dancehall culture in the early 2000s. And we also spoke with Solitaire. So yeah, it was a really great season, and we definitely thank Master T for putting on that workshop.
Okay, I want to do a special shout out to one of my special digital friends, and hopefully one day we will meet, Jill Jones. Jill Jones Music is on via Instagram, and both you ladies may not know the name Jill Jones, but I'm going to give you a little background. Do you know the artist Prince?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Jill Jones was part of his entourage for 10 years. Plus, she actually had, I know, Jill, you were in Purple Rain. What was the other Prince movie that you were in? But Jill is part of three ladies that appear. I'm blessed to host every Saturday night live at 9 p.m. Eastern time, most of the time live, if not replay, called State of Things with Aisha, Jill, and Lala. Jill, I hope you're feeling better. She had a little bit of accident with her foot. She fractured her foot, but she is getting better. So,
Good.
Jill, thank you so much for taking the time to drop by and catch it out. But definitely a musical icon in her own right. Talk about stories. This lady has stories not only about Prince, but so many other artists. And also, too, correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, her family grew up with the infamous Berry Gordy family of Motown.
Oh wow.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
So you may want to reach out to her one day and say, I know you're doing your Black Canadian thing, but to get an international perspective, maybe good. Coach Oliver Levy saying it's a process because he's still banging you about this speaker thing. I got you. I'm going to find out. Yeah. And Jill Jones says yes about the Berry Gordy thing. So absolutely. So just wanted to, we have some royalty.
Yes.
Via
Thanks
Instagram.
for sharing that. No, for sure. Again, we're building. So please, we'll definitely make note of those names and you'll hear from us. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so let me get to Share Knight's piece again, saying, are there any obstacles, roadblocks that you've encountered so far in your journey?
Where to begin?
The question is, what have we not experienced at this point? What have we not experienced? The obstacles have been more than the successes and the wins, you know? I think one that stands out for me is how difficult it is to do community work, not only in Toronto, but in Black Toronto. It just seems like it just seems like it's 10 times harder to do anything here. The amount of people that like Alannah mentioned, all these folks who were so gracious to literally sit down with our youth and be interviewed. But they were one of maybe 50, 100 people we contacted for interviews over the last 4 years and who were responsive. So we really appreciate that. But, you know, community work is not easy. It has never been easy in our community. It's complex. It's, you know, complicated. And, you know, a lot of times it's a lot of barriers. You know, we're not only dealing with barriers within community, we're also dealing with like structural barriers. You know, when you get funding, you know, you don't always get to use it in the way that you want to use it, in a way to reach more people, you know, like there was a lot of barriers that we experienced, you know, and I don't know how to start. I don't know where to, you know, I don't know how to like even conceptualize it, even verbalize it, because it's like, what have we not gone through at this point, you know? What have we not gone through?
Okay. Well, has it been worth it?
I'd say so.
Yes.
I can speak to one of we're still here. Yeah. And I can speak to perhaps one of the greatest lessons that, like, you know, all those obstacles have taught us is I think grace is really important working in and within Black community. and also boundaries. I think they, in many ways, they go hand in hand, even if it's not very apparent. But, I see the archive as an entry point in many ways, an entry point into our histories, but also a meeting place in the present, right? And so if we're building forward with these things in mind, grace is really important. It sustains us, and it also, I think that's also a great way to unify us, because I don't assume that Blackness is the unifier, right? Like it's complex, it's unique in many ways, it's contextual, but affording each other grace is really important. And I think that's also a way for us to come together with that in mind. But I also want to speak to the boundaries, because I think, one of the greatest lessons has also been like, not overextending ourselves or operating from like what we will and will not do to preserve ourselves, and also to preserve the work. This work is by Black folks, for Black folks, with Black folks. And, a lot of Black culture is subjected to a lot of altruistic, things in the city. And so, having to put our foot down and maintain boundaries and say, no, this is not in the best interest of how we are working with Black community and as young Black folks, has been such a huge lesson for us. Not all money is good money.
Exactly.
There's people come to us with different interests in mind. And, I think throughout these years, we've definitely had to learn the sound of our voices, and particularly saying no and being comfortable with that, and really honoring what we set out to do. So yeah, that's what I will say.
Jonsaba, that's a tough act to follow, but I know you can hit the challenge.
I don't think so. I think it's really good, so I'm fine with that.
Okay, you endorse that.
Yes, I endorse that.
You endorse that. I'm gonna ask, is there anything you haven't chatted about? Because before we came on live, you want to just share a whole bunch of stuff. I want to make sure that nothing is left and everything's put on the table. Are there any things you want to share with our family during this conversation?
I think, one of our greatest loves is hip hop. So maybe we'll steer the conversation.
Yes, let's talk about the anniversary. There we go. I was waiting for this. So go for it.
So our illustrious Jonsaba had this amazing idea to slide into people's DMs and basically just ask for coffee dates. We don't want to do this work in silos. So we want to connect with other Black archivists. And so Jonsaba slid into a Black archivist's DMs named Sarita Gates. And she is known as a hip hop archivist. And she does a lot of things with her platform, a lot of amazing things. And she herself is just such an amazing community person in the States. And now, she's cross borders. So like we've made connection with her. And so when we asked her for a coffee date, she was like, hey, you guys are a Black archive. And we're like, yeah, we are. We do this. We're just in Canada, So, and she was working with the Queen's Public Library on a particular project that worked with 50 archives or just institutions who take up archival work. And she was at number 48 or 49, I believe. And she was looking for one other organization.
Come on.
I'm telling you. And so she's like, hey, like we jumped on a call. Her energy was amazing. Like Sarita is like, I don't know, she's so amazing, and her energy is just so vibrant, and she really brings excitement to her work. And basically she's like, hey, do you guys want to come on to this? And we're like, of course, it's no brainer. And so, yeah, we got the opportunity to work with 50 different archives and institutions across the States, particularly the Gates Preserve, which is Sarita Gates's own organization and agency, and as well as the Queen's Public Library in New York City. And so we've been running, programming centering hip hop at 50 in the Canadian context. So we're bringing the Northern voice to the project.
I want to celebrate your huge win there. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And for those who are listening or watching, whether it's live on the replay, I always share with people, one of the fastest ways you move ahead is you just ask. Because if you didn't reach out and ask and talk with her, who knows, that may not have happened, and look where it's got you.
Yes.
And I want to meet this lady. I want to interview all the archivists. I'd love to run a series. I'd love to run a series interviewing all of them. So if it's possible, I'm making a big ask. I'd like to get an introduction. I'm doing that live right now. I'd like to have her and all the rest of I'd love to do an archivist series, a Black archivist series on this platform.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Remember, you were first, though. Remember, you were first.
We appreciate
Yes, we were. Yes, we were.
You were first. You were first.
Sarita would be great. She's from Queens, New York, and she has Queens on her back. Like she's like the energy is on 1000, and she would be a great person to talk with, because she's been doing this work and she's been bringing others along. And I think that's what's so special about her work, is that she has attained so many like accolades, and just she has a huge platform, but she's always working with Black community. Whenever we reach out, she always responds like graciously, and she really puts in time into this. And so it's been a huge inspiration to our work, and we're just very grateful to have people in the field that we have to look towards to say, hey, this is possible.
You deserve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to stop the Instagram broadcast right now. Thank you, everyone who watched live on the replay. If you want to catch more of the conversation or the replay, you can catch the full thing on the Dr. Vibe Show YouTube channel. I want to say thank you to classic_C_gems, M. Lewis 416, Coach Oliver Levy. Their Instagram account is at Building a Black Archive. As it's spelled, that's their Instagram handle. Jill Jones Music, thank you so much. Dr. Tachi, Speak with Candace. Ron Lewis Photos, Frequency Event Promotions. Thank you so much. If you want to catch Farah Johnson 96, Vestigia.os. Thank you so much for catching some of it on Instagram. You can catch the full thing on the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube. And when you go on YouTube, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the notification button. Be well, keep the faith, make sure you give yourself grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we ain't finished yet. Those are the IG people that just get an appetizer. So they want to catch the whole thing. They're going to come to YouTube and watch the whole thing. What are you excited about going forward?
We have in the works. Like we do this. The last 4 years has been a lot of trial and error, but I think we're moving into an era where it's like we see the vision. So Jonsaba, do you want to share a little bit about what we're looking towards?
Sure. So we're definitely looking towards, expanding on what we offer. We would love to have a space one day in the near future where we could just have something sustainable, but also like have a place for our archive, because people think we're a digital archive only, but we actually have physical archives as well.
Okay.
So we want to have a space one day where we can have where we can showcase our physical archive. So that's like something, hopefully, we talk about what will the next 4 years look like. We're hoping within those next 4 years that could come about. We want to elevate our artist residency and see if we can eventually take it to the school system. So like making it a course, particularly the work we do around like Canadian hip hop, because it's not only talking about the music that we bring in, we talk about like the socioeconomic aspect of like that time period from the 80s to the 2000s, where, we had Black activism kind of going hand in hand with Canadian hip hop. So while certain songs were, rising and, the music was transitioning from the underground to the mainstream, we had, for example, Can't Repress the Cause from 1991, which was that song about, campaigning for a Black-owned radio station, which that bid was denied. And, but 10 years later, we got Flow 93.5. So like, there were a lot of socioeconomic, socio-political things happening in our community, and we liked looking at how the music were intertwined with that. So we would love to bring that to the school system, to the elementary school system, junior high, high school, and even to the post-secondary universities and colleges, because we think that the work that we do and the syllabus that we have is worthy to be in an institution, that more people need to be exposed to it, because the reality of our work as well is that young people are not, they don't know about this work. They don't know about hip hop artists before Drake. All they know is Drake and The Weeknd. Even Cardinal Official, who's like one of our icons, you know, a lot of people don't know who he is, and he's not that old in terms of like his work. He is very recent history, but a lot of young people are not getting, they don't know. And that was something we encountered, and we're like, well, why are these gaps happening? Because a lot of these young people, their parents are probably Gen X, you know, or baby boomers, so they were coming of age during that era, but the knowledge isn't being passed down. So we find our work imperative to like pass that down. And what are the ways in which we can pass it down? We meet young people where they're at. So a lot of young people aren't in the school system. So we love to bring, you know, have a course tailored for young people that we can bring in and teach them about Canadian hip hop and how it's related to their identity as Black people here in Canada. So that's like, those are some of the things I'm thinking of, that we're thinking of building, of course, more archives, you know, because we wouldn't be building a Black archive without building more archives and more archival collections. So, yeah, I don't know, Alannah, if you probably had something else. You always have something else to add to the conversation. I don't know.
Well, I do actually have something to add now that so we are actually getting ready to launch our first oral narrative podcast series, and it's you know, centering Black geographies in Canada. It's a very special project. It's, you know, very much a labor of love, but a lot of the work that we are doing, as Jonsaba mentioned, was we are unearthing a lot of Black, you know, histories. So it's not like readily available. It's not, you know, these narratives are not in dominant media or culture. And so when we, you know, I was introduced to Black geographies as a field of study by, you know, a scholar named Catherine McKittrick when I was in my earlier days, in my early 20s. And I've never conceptualized, you know, this is a field of study and a field of exploration. And so, you know, how it's influenced our project is that young people were reaching out to folks in various parts of the country, places that they particularly have never been, or perhaps they didn't know much about. But we, you know, through our lessons, we talk a little bit more about, so this is what happened in, you know, the aftermath of Africville, or perhaps Little Burgundy, the Harlem of the North, and then going more West Coast, to Queens Mary part in Edmonton, where a lot of it's, you know, it's an enclave for a lot of African immigrants, and even locally, like Regent Park, you know, there's rupture, but there's also an afterlife. And I think that it was really important for us to capture that, you know, Black vitality and not just, you know, Black death. We didn't reduce our history just to slavery or a particular form of violence. It's like, how do we conceptualize community and how do we build forward? So that's captured in a lot of our episodes. And, you know, it was a labor of love. A lot of young folks put in so many hours into the project, and we're ready to launch soon. So it's really exciting.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
See, she added on nicely, didn't she, for our family? Didn't she add on nicely?
She did. And we also have a window display at Type Bookstore in the Junction area. If you're in the Toronto area, we were approached by Jess Felicite of the Type Bookstore in the Junction to curate their window in celebration of Hip Hop 50. So Alannah and I, and along with Jess, we spent countless hours literally curating that window display, which we're really proud of. So if you're ever in the West End of Toronto, in the Junction, take a pass by type bookstore there, and you'll see a window display of different portraits of Canadian hip hop icons. You'll see maybe a record of Rascal's Northern Touch 25th anniversary record, and you'll see a TV with a loop of Canadian hip hop videos playing as well, along with our top picks of books on hip hop and that we curated and we recommended as well in the window display. So I want to mention that because I forgot about that. So.
No problem. That's why I want to make sure you get everything out. So interesting. And I saw in my Instagram feed the other day, there's actually I'm pretty sure a documentary about the history of much music out.
Yeah.
But I think you have to pay to see it, but I think that'd be very curious to see what content is in that documentary and how much Black Canadian content is in that documentary. And if probably there isn't enough, so that may be something that we will see from both you or your organization in the near future.
Everything is possible.
Yes.
I received that. I received that. So as we start winding down our epic conversation, what can the Dr. Vibe Show family do to help Baba?
Well, first and foremost, you've shared your platform. So, we come in gratitude and thank you for having us and allowing us to talk more about the work that we're doing. As your screen suggests, we're all over social media. So please follow us and, feel free to slide into our DMs.
I think Oliver Levy is going to be sliding your DMs, wanting to know about your speaker series. I can imagine.
We welcome it. And also, again, we're dropping our archive, our podcast series this fall. So, if you do follow our pages, we'll have more announcements about that. So yeah, just stay tuned. We're building this.
Wonderful. Jonsaba, anything you want to add? Because it sounds like she closed nicely, but I just want to make sure there's room for you.
No, that was perfect.
Okay. Well, ladies, I want to thank you first for your time. That's the most valuable thing that you have, and everything you have done, are doing, and will be doing in regards to Baba and our people. If there's anything I can do to potentially help you score goals and get wins, don't be afraid to ask. I'll be keeping a watch on both of you. And on behalf of the Dr. Vibe family, I would like to say thank you. As always, make sure, as you said earlier, make sure you give yourself grace, and you just don't manage your time, you manage your energy.
Thank you.
So look at this. And a final comment from the family here. Cass Lou says, good evening. All this is a great concept to direct toward youth communities, school-based approach and narration. Interesting. Keep building.
Thank you.
Cass.
Yeah.
Just before we let you both go, have you approached the education system at all?
Good question. So we have worked, for instance, with U of T. We are in conversation with some few scholars. So we're building towards it. We definitely want to, particularly high school, we mentioned that high school was such a pivotal time in our lives for accessing Black histories. And so, we definitely want to build towards that and being in classrooms and meeting with Black youth where they're at. And also, in the community centers are still such a pivotal thing in our, like space for Black youth. We're definitely working towards it. Again, we're building, and good work takes time. So that's all I'll say.
You keep on adding the layers. You've made me think of another conversation piece. What is one or two things the Dr. Vibe Show family can do to help our Black youth, coming from your lens?
I think the first thing is definitely passing on knowledge. I think there's like generational gaps between like Gen X generation and millennials, and then generation gaps between millennials and Gen Zs. And I just think the gaps get wider with each generation. So I think the number one thing, if you have children, if you have nieces and nephews, talk about your history, talk about what it was like growing up in Canada, talk about the music you used to listen to, introduce them to the music you used to listen to. You know, that's how, like, for me, that's how I got to know a lot of things. Like, my dad listened to a lot of different music, so that's informed my own music history, but I wouldn't have known that if my dad didn't really introduce me to that. So I feel like the parents, the aunties, the uncles, like, share your histories, because when you die, your history dies with you. But if you pass it on, it continues to live. So I think that's one thing. And I think living here in Canada, like, we have it, as Black people, we're always trying to cultivate our identity. We're trying to figure out, how do we fit in, how do we make our identity our own. So I feel like Black youth need to see themselves reflected in, you know, in the stories we tell them. So if they know that, you know, Dr. Vibe, that you went through similar things that they went through, that they're
still
going
am.
through, yeah, and still am, then they can, you know, then they realize, like, it's not just them, you know, they're not only going through this is nothing new. So I think passing down our own personal histories, our own cultural histories, are really important to the next generation, because they don't know it, and they're going around, like, dealing with all these kind of issues because they don't know who they are, and they don't know where they come from and what legacies they come from. So that's one thing that's really heavy for me, that we hope with Baba we can continue, like, bridging those gaps, so that there aren't any gaps left, you know, within our communities.
Well said. Well said. Well, you know what? I'm going to make suggestions too. There's a number of Canadian music figures that you may not be thinking of, but I'm actually going to suggest my dad. He's actually a member of the Vinyl Record Collectors Hall of Fame of America.
Cool.
So there are many people that if you reach out to the right people, will expose you to other people in, like, you can reach out to me. There's a whole bunch of D-Days I could have you sit down with, whole pile. And if you want to go international, there's international people also that I could introduce you to. But you sound like you have enough on your plate, but whenever you want to reach out, we're here to help and serve you. Last comment here by Dr. Tachi. There's another person I would suggest you interview. She is incredible in regards to media, tech, and pop culture. And she said, this was wonderful. Thank you. Who actually has her PhD in mass communications from Howard University.
Awesome. Ooh.
See you.
Howard. I know. She got me at Howard. She got me at Howard. She got me at
All right.
You know?
Well, just a little historic fact. My dad went to Howard University, and when he went to Howard University, one of his teachers was the late Toni Morrison.
Oh, wow.
So we just leave it at that. Ladies, we're going to let you go. We know you had a long day, but thanks for everything. Their contact information has been showing throughout the conversation. As always, remember to give yourselves grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and keep in touch, okay?
Definitely.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Thank you for a great conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure. Good night. All right, family. Building a Black Archive. They brought the heat, and they got a lot of stuff going on. There's your contact information at the bottom of the screen, or if you're listening on audio. Instagram, Building a Black Archive. Facebook, Building a Black Archive. Email, hello@buildingablack-archive. So there you go. So let's do some housekeeping before we jump it off. So let's do this. Pardon me. You can watch replays of the Dr. Vibe Show on the Dr. Vibe Show channel on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And you can also go to my website, thedrvibeshow.com. Please, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button. And also like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And tell other people about it. All right? Also, if you want to advertise your business or service on the platform, please email me dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com. So as we close it out, as we always do, this is what we say: live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get stronger to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. And one last comment here. Fab Joe, really good interview. Have a good night. Right back at you. Hope you're following us on YouTube. Then I'll know you thought it was a really good conversation because we do this all the time. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith. Walk good. And we'll see you soon.